guys, welcome back to Read Instead. I'm Jake. Glad to have you here today. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there who are celebrating this American holiday today. I am. This is what celebrating Thanksgiving is for me. I get some time to myself and some time to make this video, time to relax, watch some football. I'm going to continue reading The Fall of Hyperion. That's what I've been reading by Dan Simmons. I'm really enjoying that book. This whole year, man, I'm so thankful for when it comes to what I've been reading this year in 2024. I've really had a great year of reading. I can't think of really any duds off the top of my head. I don't think there were any books that I picked up this year that I didn't finish. So I'm thankful. That's one thing that I'm thankful for all the books that I've read this year. I've been thinking lately about making sort of an original video, something that I hadn't seen personally done before on booktube. And I came up with this idea to make my top 10 favorite scenes from books that I've read. I thought it was a cool idea at first, and then I started to actually put together the list, and it was remarkably difficult. A couple reasons why it was difficult. For me anyway, I can remember really cool scenes from books that I read like a couple years ago or maybe 3 years ago, but to remember all the context around it proved to be a little more difficult than I had anticipated. So I sort of had to go back and just maybe read little portions of books that I'd read in the past to give these scenes some context. And speaking of giving these scenes some context, I want to talk about this. So obviously, in making a list like this, it's going to be pretty much impossible to not maybe give away some spoilers. Spoilers, in my opinion, are a little subjective. Some people don't want to know anything. They don't want to know anything that happens in the book. They don't want to know anything that has to do with the storyline. I mean, nothing whatsoever. I'm actually kind of like that. I don't even read really the back of books sometimes to give the little synopsis of what it's about, because sometimes I think they give away too much on those. Some people don't mind at all, as long as you don't give away the ending or something like that. So having said that, a few of these books on this list, a few of these scenes, I'm gonna obviously be giving away some things that have to do with the storyline. I'm gonna give just a little bit of context. I can't go into a ton of context because this video will end up being 2 hours long. So this is what I want to tell you guys. For each entry on this list, I will have the book sitting right here next to me on this table, and you will see the book, and I'll obviously announce the book. And if you don't want to know anything about the book, anything that takes place, I would just say maybe skip to the next one. A few of these, maybe just a couple, I'm actually going to give away like the ending scene, okay? So I just want to give everybody fair warning. I'll put in the title of this video a spoiler warning, so I just wanted to share that with you guys in advance. For some of you, maybe you've read most of the books on this list, so this will just sort of be hopefully an enjoyable video for you, and I won't be giving away anything because you would have already read it. So without further ado, these are, for me, my top 10 favorite scenes that I've read in books. Let's get to it. Okay, so number 10 on the list, this is going to be Fonda Lee's Jade War, book number 2 in the Greenbone saga. And what scene am I talking about? I'm talking about right about smack dab in the middle of this book. One of our main characters from the main family that this whole series focuses on, the Kaul family. The sister in the family, Shay, challenges her rival clan family leader, Ayit Mada, to a duel. And this is in a public place. And some of you might not like the reason why I enjoyed this scene so much, but I'll share it with you. First of all, it's just a great fight scene. It was Fonda Lee really wrote it well. It's in a public place, and when Shay challenges her, it's very public and it's very open. But the reason why I really liked it, or one of the reasons why, it's not the only reason why, is that Shay had just kind of been getting on my nerves in this book a little bit. I actually wrote about this in my review that I put on Goodreads. She just had an arrogance about her that I didn't really like. Um, and then also the families and the people on Kikon, the island, start to sort of globalize, and they start to make connections across the sea and stuff like that to other countries. And Kikon had once been sort of an isolated place, and I actually didn't really like it too much at first when they started to globalize. And what had happened was Shay started to make small connections and stuff like that, and Ayat Mada, her rival, basically put that out and made it public and smeared her image in a lot of ways. And that's the sort of the main reason why Shay challenges her. But in the fight, Ayat Mada gets the better of her, and the fight culminates into Shay bleeding profusely on the ground with a near fatal wound, but not completely fatal, and she's begging for her life, begging for her life in front of all these people. And I'm just kind of, I don't know, I'm a little nuts, but I like when the bad guy wins sometimes in books, and this was certainly an example of that when Ayat Mada has Shay, one of our protagonists, on her knees begging for her life. I just remember that fight scene, and it really humbled Shay, obviously. So number 10 on the list is the fight scene between Shay Kaul and Ayat Mada in Jade War by Fond du Lis. Okay, number 9 on the list. I have mentioned this before on this channel that The Hobbit was one of those early books that I read that really set me on this reading journey that I started 3 or 4 years ago. It sort of made me fall in love with reading, and more so the coming of age and the adventure story. And the story that we find in The Hobbit and the story that we find in ultimately Bilbo Baggins. And the scene that I'm talking about in this particular novel is when the dwarves are going through the forest, and they are taken in by the wood elves, and they're placed in holding in the sort of a dungeon keep. Bilbo uses his finesse and his courage to go into these dungeons and release them from these dungeons, and then ultimately the way in which they escape from the wood elves is when they hide themselves in these barrels, and they fall over a waterfall and into a river that departs from this little mountain area where the wood elves stay. And the reason why I put this on the list is I just remember very vividly reading this scene and really just being completely engrossed in the story. And I felt like, I know it's as crazy as this sounds, but I felt like I was sort of in one of those barrels with them, with Bilbo and the dwarfs. It was just so cool. It was just I was on this adventure with them. I was intrigued, and really this is just one of the main scenes in this book that I can remember that I just was really enjoying my time when I was reading it, when they escaped from the wood elves. So number 9 on the list, the escape from the dungeons of the wood elves in The Hobbit. Okay, number 8 on the list, and this comes from Joe Abercrombie's third book in the original First Law trilogy, The Last Argument of Kings. I have spoken of a character on this channel before, and that character goes by the name of Sandan Glokta. There's a lot of backstory to Sandan Glokta. I'm not going to get too much into it right now, just for the sake of time. But he is certainly a troubled figure, and he has many skills that he has acquired throughout the years. And at this point in his life, and at this point in the trilogy, he's sort of implementing them on behalf of the government that he's working for. And the scene that I'm talking about is he is in a sort of a political meeting with hierarchy. Gurkish hierarchy, just another sort of country, and he's acting on behalf of his government. And so much of Joe Abercrombie's books, all that I've read anyway, a lot of it has to do with warfare and conquest and sort of fighting over land and territory and whatnot. So Sandan Glokta finds himself as a diplomat on behalf of his government, and they're in a meeting. And long story short, his closest sort of sidekick slash bodyguards that have been with him since the very, very beginning of this series turn on him. An assassination attempt takes place. Well, lo and behold, Sandan Glockta defends himself, and what happens is he falls on his back in this cane that he always has had with him throughout the entire series. Because earlier in before the series even starts, it tells you a little bit of his backstory. He was taken prisoner, and he was basically a prisoner of war uh, in enemy territory for like 5 years, and he was tortured like ceaselessly. And anyway, so he has this cane. He always has this cane with him. And when this assassination attempt by his closest allies takes place and the betrayal happens, he falls on his back. And this cane, it actually turns into like he has a spear on the end of it, and he defends himself by stabbing this bodyguard. And it was just very. I just remember it just came out of nowhere. I didn't see this coming, and the way in which Glockta defends himself, it just got my heart. Like you just go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, and you sort of develop another appreciation for Sandan Glockta. At least I did. He just seemed extremely resilient. On top of all the things that makes him who he is, he's very smart. He's very he's also like really resentful and bitter about his past, but I think he uses that to fuel his motivations to be a diplomat and to work on behalf of his government. But I just remember that scene from this book, and it was really impressive. So number 8 on the list, that'll be Sandan Glockta's assassination attempt in The Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. Okay, number 7 on the list, and this is going to come from book number 5 of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, The Wolves of the Kala. And briefly, I'll just tell you this book, the entire series is a journey to the Dark Tower. I've spoken about this series before. And really, the whole book of The Wolves of the Kala is Roland de Chains and his companions, the Quartet, if is what it's called, happen upon a town, and the name of the town is called the Kala, and they ultimately stay there for a few days, and they realize that this town has been under attack from a sort of like a military base, and it turns out this town has been under attack. Every certain period of time, this sort of military base that is guarding the Dark Tower in some way sends out these robotic creatures on horseback, actually, and they invade the town, and they end up doing damage. And these townsfolk tell them that this attack is about to happen, and Roland and his companions decide that they're gonna stick it out and stay with this town. It's very sort of Old West. This particular book in the series, but really the entire Dark Tower series has a very, the first book is called The Gunslinger, so it sort of sets you up with a lot of sort of old Western themes and stuff like that. Although it's not, these aren't Western books, it has a very Western feel to it. There is a scene in this book, and I just want to let you guys know, I meant to say this earlier, but I'll just tell you now that a few of these scenes on here are very subtle, but just for me personally, they spoke volumes. It wasn't a real high intense scene. All the scenes that I've mentioned so far have kind of been like high energy scenes, for lack of a better term. This isn't so much, but it was very subtle, and it was very beautiful, and it just spoke volumes to me. So on the eve of this battle that's about to take place, and the town has been prepared, and Roland and his companions prepare the town to defend itself. On the eve of this battle, they have sort of like a block party, if you will, like an outdoor sort of festival. They light bonfires and they have some music and stuff like that and entertainment. And Roland, who's throughout the entire series is pretty reserved. He's a pretty reserved, sort of soft-spoken. He's introverted in a lot of ways, and that's because his sole desire and everything that he does is just to get to the Dark Tower. There's this moment in this party that's happening outside where Roland starts to dance, and he does this dance basically for these people, and it was so sort of outside of his character. And I just remember it was just so profound to me. He just he opened himself up, and you saw a new side of Roland. Because look, this is the fifth book in the series, so once you get to here, it's like this quartet and Roland and this group of people going after the Dark Tower. They feel like family to you. You know what I mean? And you have this connection with Roland, and then he just sort of does this dance. And actually, in the book, there's illustrations of it and stuff, and it's really good. And the way it's portrayed in the book is it's not like he's dancing in like a breakdancing circle, and everybody's like yeah go 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 like that. It's nothing like that. It's everybody's just sort of sitting and appreciating. Almost like the way you would listen to classical music or watch an opera or something like that, but he's doing a dance, and it just, for me, I don't know why, the subtlety of it and the opening up of Roland's heart in a way was just very profound to me. So this will be number 7 on the list. That is Roland Deschain's Dance for the Townspeople of the Kala in The Wolves of the Kala by Stephen King. Okay, and I didn't do this on purpose. I'll just let you know. It just really, it happened this way when I was really thinking of how to put these in order. Because, guys, these are in order from, like, I don't want to say worst to best, but they are in order of, what my favorite scenes are. And 2 Dark Tower books just ended up being back to back. So my next one on the list, this will be number 6 on the list. This is the saloon near shootout that happens between Roland as a young man and his friends. Let me explain. So, as I mentioned to you guys before, this novel, the 4th book in the Dark Tower series, is it's a different story compared to the rest of the novels, because what it is Roland just sitting down with his quartet and explaining his entire backstory and what brought him to seeking after the Dark Tower. That's what this is. It's a story within a story. 98% of this book is a story within a story. Roland and his friends is in his younger days, and he's really like a teenager. And basically what happens is you got to think sort of Wild West. Think of a lot of, these books, these Dark Tower books are very reminiscent of Westerns in a lot of ways. And what happens is Roland's friends find themselves in a saloon, basically. And what happens is they sort of have a run-in with this guy who's sort of coming through the area, and there's a lot of corruption going on and stuff like that. His friends ultimately start to undermine their plans of these men that are sort of taking advantage of this town in predatory ways. But anyway, earlier on, they're in this saloon, and the friends get into a conflict with these guys, and guns get pulled. And what happens is, it's a very cool scene where one gun gets pulled on another man, okay, and this man's over here, and then this man's friend is somewhere else in the room, and then he pulls a gun on that guy, and then basically that sort of escalates, and it goes like 4 or 5 stages, when ultimately Roland is the last one sort of in the doorway of the saloon, and he points the gun at the last guy and says, listen, if one of these guns goes off, we're all gonna die here today except me. I'm gonna be the last one standing. And it was a very, very intense situation. I hope I explained that. Okay, so it's like gun pulled on one guy, then the guy holding the gun gets a gun pulled on him, then that guy holding the gun towards that guy. It's like a chain reaction. and the dialogue that takes place during the scene, I just remember it's very cinematic, almost like a Quentin Tarantino movie. That's what it reminded me of. Number 6 on the list will be the near shootout in Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. Okay, moving on. We are in the top 5 now, and fair warning, I'm gonna give you guys like the last, maybe not the last exact scene in this book, but it's the climax of this book, and this is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This was a gut-wrenching book, and the scene that I'm talking about is basically a willful execution that takes place. I'm going to lay it all out for you in a minute or less. A woman unwillingly gets married to an older man, a very abusive older man. This woman can't bear children. She continues to be married to this man. She gets older. That man then marries also another younger girl. They can do that in this culture. It's in Afghanistan. So he's married to 2 women. One woman's in like her 40s, the other woman's like 20 years old. So there's like a 20 year age gap. This older woman at first is very resentful of the younger woman because she can bear children. So really this older woman is just kind of in the house now. She doesn't serve any purpose. The husband doesn't want anything to do with her. She's just a person living in the house made to do chores and sort of keep her mouth shut. As the book progresses, the 2 women start to become very, very close friends, and they endure the abusive nature of this husband that they're both married to. And what happens is there is a fight that ultimately takes place between the younger woman, who's named Layla, by the way. Layla is the younger one. Miriam is the older one. There is a physical fight that takes place between Layla and the husband of the home. Older man, drunk all the time. A physical fight that takes place, and Layla ends up killing the man. And bear in mind that she has a child. She's had a child with this man and whatnot. So when the authorities come to investigate, Miriam at this stage is extremely. She almost loves this girl like a daughter. That's sort of the character arc that takes place. At first, they can't stand each other. Miriam can't stand her. This younger girl coming to sort of usurp her as a wife, as a woman, as a child bearer. And then at the end of the novel, it's to the point where she loves this younger woman. The authorities come to investigate, and they know that the penalty for something like this is death. And what happens is Miriam tells the authorities that she's actually the one who killed this man. She does this in place of Layla, and she ends up going into like an arena. It's almost like a soccer stadium, and she gets beheaded. And it was just like such a beautiful act of, love. I mean, she's literally dying for this younger woman, so this younger woman can continue her life. She ends up falling. She's in love with another man at this point, and Miriam knows this, and Miriam doesn't want her life to end. The younger woman, she wants her to live her life with her child and this new man that she's in love with, and this act of bravery and this act of sacrifice allows her to do that. So very profound, very heavy, but certainly a scene that I'll never forget. That's number 5 on the list. What would we call this? We would call it Miriam's Executed for Layla, and that's in A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Okay, moving on. Number 4 on the list. 4, 3, 2. Yeah, this is number 4 on the list. This is such a big, epic book. And by the way, this is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Such a big, epic book about, so many characters, and, it covers like over 30 years. There's so much that goes on. But again, getting back to subtlety. I told you guys before that sometimes a scene is very subtle, but for me it just lands on my heart in a very profound way. And I'm talking about the time in which Prior Philip is traveling and he sees Remigius on the road. Let me give you a little bit of context. Earlier in this novel, the first like tenth of this novel, Prior Philip, there's this character named Prior Philip, and he works in a priory, and with monks, and things are taking place. Like one priory is gonna shut down, and he may go to another one, and there's some sort of politicking that takes place as to who's gonna be the prior of this next priory. I don't think it's called monastery. I believe they're called priories. But basically, this place where monks live and they do God's work and whatnot. And a lot of people are in favor of Prior Philip becoming the prior of this place, and he has a lot of support. But he has one man, a fellow uh, monk, that is doing everything he possibly can to undermine Prior Philip and basically lose this election for him. And he's slandering him in a lot of ways, and he's just making things very, very difficult for him. This man is named Remigius, and he's just vying for power. He's power hungry, and he's spiteful and bitter. And there's nothing redeeming about this guy. There's nothing really to like about him. Cut. Like three-quarters of the way through this book, Remigius has kind of been removed from the monastery, and he's not. He's a character that you end up sort of forgetting about. There's a scene where Prior Philip is traveling, and he's on the road, and he has a younger companion with him, a younger monk in training, sort of some discipleship going on there, and he's going up a hill, and he sees Remigius on the side of this road. Once Prior Remigius on the side of this road, and he is absolutely destitute. He's almost naked. He's starving to death. He's dirty. He's lost his mind, and for whatever circumstances, I don't know why, he was probably tossed out of. He was tossed out of the clergy, and nobody just wanted anything to do with him anymore. And Prior Philip sees this man, and he gets off of his horse. He takes his cloak off and he puts it around him. Then he picks up this man and he puts him on his horse, and he's going to take him back to the monastery to ultimately restore him. Remigius is like, when he's doing this, in the midst of doing this, as he's taking his cloak off and wrapping it around him and stuff, and Remigius can't understand why they recognize each other, and he can't understand why Prior Philip would be doing this. And then the line that I remember the most is when the younger protege, the younger monk, starts questioning Prior Philip, and he's saying, "Why are you doing this? Why would you do this?" And he said, "Because today a soul was saved." He said, "Today a soul was saved," and it was just like so. He was basically, in other words, he was showing him the goodness of God. He was showing this man the goodness of God through this act. And he was basically leading Remigius through this act to God. It was almost like Remigius's faith was just a said faith. It never really meant anything. And he just used the faith in the church as a way to sort of gain power. But through this act, he actually came to faith right then and there. I just always love that scene. It's gonna stick with me for the rest of my life. This is one of my favorite books of all time. So, one of my favorite scenes from my favorite book. I'll never forget it. That's number 4, Prior Philip's Forgiveness and Restoration for Remigius in The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Okay, so we're in the top 3 now. It's getting pretty serious, by the way. And that brings us to Dune by Frank Herbert. Again, this is I'm giving a lot away here, so if you've never read Dune before and you want to, without knowing anything, then you might want to skip over this one. But this brings us all the way to the end of Dune. My favorite there's so many themes and so many sort of storylines and character arcs that take place within this novel. But my favorite is the entire coming of age story that happens around Paul Atreides and how he ascends to being the Muad'Dib and the true prophet of the Fremen people. And there are many sort of things that take place that reveal Paul becoming more and more of a Fremen, so to speak, and becoming their leader. But the one that's the most profound to me is this conversation that he has with the Emperor at the end of the novel. And I actually bookmarked it because I'm just going to read it to you guys real quick. "And what of Arrakis? the emperor asked. Another garden world full of gentle things? The Fremen have the word of Muad'Dib, Paul said. There will be flowing water here, open to the sky, and green oasis, rich with good things. But we have the spice to think of too. Thus, there will always be desert on Arrakis, and fierce winds, and trials to toughen a man. We Freemen have a saying: God created Arrakis to train the faithful. One cannot go against the word of God. And the reason why that's so profound to me is you got to think, a boy from another planet, he comes and he sort of gets taken in by these people, and they think he's something that he doesn't think he is. It gets all the way to the point where now he's referring, he says, we Freemen, we Freemen. And then he says, one cannot go against the word of God. So he has totally, at this point in the novel, he has completely and totally embodied who he has become. So it was just, again, subtle but extremely profound. And I just remember, feeling that the transformation had been complete into Paul sort of fulfilling his destiny, especially for the Fremen people. So that's going to be number 3 on the list. We'll call that Paul's conversation with the Emperor at the end of Dune. Okay, that brings us to number 2 on the list, and that is book number 2 in the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, Enemy of God. And what scene am I talking about? Arthur loves Guinevere. He has a major, major crush on her. And she's sort of playing him a little bit. Then you have this character, Lancelot, who in this particular series is portrayed as sort of, he's a cowardly and he just wants to gain power. And he's using Christianity and the church to do that. And he's basically just pretending to be a Christian. Get to a scene in the middle of this book where Arthur's son had been kidnapped. Lancelot has, he has these sort of two twin brothers that follow him around, sort of help him do his conniving and his bidding. So they get word of this. Arthur and Durfel get word of this, and Durfel's the character in which this entire series is told through, a companion of Arthur. And Arthur and Durfel go on this expedition to get Arthur's son back, and they know that Lancelot had something to do with this. They show up to this place. It's like a little building area, and they sneak in, and what Arthur and Durfel see is a pagan worship act going on. And basically what it reveals is that Guinevere is a part of, first of all, she's tied to Lancelot in a romantic way. Secondly, they're not Christians. They're complete pagan worshippers, and they're doing some sort of like sexual pagan worship act. And it all falls on Arthur's mind, right? That not only does Guinevere want, she's not interested in him in a romantic way, but it also turns out that she's not a Christian, and she's actively like being, sleeping around with men in a pagan worship. And it's just like insanely, you just read it and you're like, what is happening? So it all culminates in basically Arthur and Durfel, they just slay everybody in this whole building, and they take back Guinevere and Arthur's son. That sort of starts this this open rivalry between Arthur and Lancelot. Before, it had been sort of you didn't really know Lancelot's motivations and how sort of two-sided was he. You had an idea that he was sort of, two-sided. He acted one way, but he thought a different way. But this revealed it all, and it opened it right up. And I just thought it was so cool. So that's going to be number 2 on the list. Arthur and Durfel rescue back Guinevere and Arthur's son from a pagan ritual worship act. That's what we'll call it. Number 2 on the list by Bernard Cornwell. we've arrived. Number one on the list. And as you guys have figured out by now, this is probably one of the longer videos that I've ever made, but that's okay. I'm enjoying it. I hope you guys are too. That brings us to number one. What is my number one favorite scene in any of the books that I've ever read in my life? That is going to be the ending scene in Golden Sun by Pierce Brown, book number 2 in the Red Rising saga. If you guys haven't read the Red Rising saga and you want to, I hate to say this, but don't listen to what I'm about to say because I'm giving away the end of this book. If you guys have read this series and if you've read this book, you know exactly where I'm going with this. There is a feast party that's taking place. Darrow, our main character, has ascended to a gold, not only a gold, but a leader of golds and a military leader and a great warrior. And he comes to the Citadel. And basically it's a big rejoicing party that takes place because a military campaign that he had a lot to do with was just, proved to be victorious. And he comes to this place, and at this party is sort of a rival of his, not sort of a rival, a rival in the full sense. But at this particular moment, it's you think that they're sort of resolving some of their problems, and they're going to learn to sort of coexist together. This is another boy that went through the academy with him. That's all Red Rising, the first book. He goes by the name the Jackal, and he was a rival with him in that academy. But again, now it's like the bigger picture, and it's actually they're putting their military prowess and skills to use. And Darrow just seems to be the more the better leader and the better fighter. And you think that the Jackal is sort of gonna succumb to that and be a team player and stuff. And man, does it change quickly. What happens next at this party is pretty insane. The Jackal ends up finding out that Darrow is actually a Red. That's sort of the main premise of this entire series. A Red is a different class of people. It's a different type of people altogether. And Darrow had been hiding this from everybody for the entire series. The Jackal finds out, and within just a matter of seconds, like a few of Darrow's companions that he's at the party with get killed. They get murdered. A friend, or someone that Darrow thought was a friend, sticks him with a potion that renders him he can't move. He can see and know everything that's going on, but it's like a sedative, and he can't really move. He's stuck with this thing from a friend of his. He's rendered he can't move. He sees his friends get murdered. Then the Jackal, and then then there's more murdering taking place to a few of the higher ups that are at this. A few of the sort of aristocrats and high up government people at this place. They all get murdered, and the Jackal starts going off on telling everyone who Darrow really is. And then a present is displayed to Darrow while he again is incapacitated, and it's in the form of a box, and the lid of the box gets opened up, and there's a head in there, and that head belongs to without getting too much into it, it belongs to someone that was pretty near and dear to Darrow, sort of a mentor in a lot of ways, and also his his best friend's father. Also, what makes this scene so cool and why it's really stuck out to me is because this middle book in the series, Golden Sun, is a real middle book in the trilogy in its truest sense, because this is how the book ends. Most books and like even books in series and sci-fi and fantasy series, whether they're the middle book, wherever they land in the middle of the series, and when they end, there's usually some sort of like resolve that happens, some sort of like resolution or something, and then it's sort of just bringing you to the next book, right? This book ends at this scene at this feast party, and you're like, you close it and you're like what? How does the book? It's just how does the book end there? You don't know. Daryl again is incapacitated. It plays out like Daryl's about to be murdered. Why not? You know what I mean? His friends were just murdered. He was just outed. His real identity was just outed to all these people. The Jackal, his rival, who hates him beyond anything else, is in front of him now, and again he's incapacitated. It'd be easy to kill him. Everybody at this party is now like turned against him, and then Pierce Brown just leaves it right there. And you know, I'm fortunate that all the books were out in this series when I read it. A lot of people didn't have that luxury, so they, you know, finished this book and then they had to wait like a year or two for the next book to come out. I couldn't imagine that, but just an insane, and looking back on it now, like I really appreciate that Pierce Brown had that courage, I guess, to end it that way on such a like there must have been thousands of people who read this and just like threw the book against the wall or something like that. Just like how can you end it right there? Just insanity. So that's you know, that's what I put for number one on my list. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I put a lot of thought into it. If any of you have some scenes in novels that you love, please share them in the comments. If you agree or disagree with any of my selections on this list, feel free also to comment on that. I hope you guys are reading something this weekend, this long weekend that most of us have here in the United States. Outside of the United States, I hope you guys are reading something too and enjoying yourselves in doing so. So thank you very much for watching this. I'll see you guys next time.